Hello, everyone. I've been thinking of you a lot, just preparing, making some adjustments for what we're going to go over tonight. So I've been looking forward to this evening. So thank you for being here, whether you're with us live or you're going to be listening to the replay. It just touches my heart to be here doing this work. So tonight, and as every night, we're going to start with a centering. So if you're in a place where it's safe for you to do so, I just invite you to close your eyelids if you're comfortable with this. And just give yourself the next few moments to arrive. Just centering your breathing in your heart, centering your awareness in your heart. Just imagining that it's your heart that's doing the breathing, that your heart is breathing in, and that your heart is breathing out. This simple act of heart-centered breathing helps nourish the nervous system. It helps balance the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. And it really creates a unified field of resonance within our body and within our being. So just taking a few delicious moments here to just land in your heart. Not trying to make anything happen, but just simply tuning in to the center of your chest and breathing in here and breathing out from here. And noticing if there's any sensations. Maybe you feel warmth, or maybe you don't feel much of anything at all, or maybe you feel a lot of energy moving. Again, just noticing and coming into contact with this heart, this beautiful heart of yours. We recognize that the nature, the purpose and intention that brings us together here is regarding matters of the heart, having to do with intimacy, having to do with connection. And so all of us have known areas of pain having to do with connection. We've all known heartbreak in one way or another. We know what it feels like to feel vulnerable. And so just widening our heart around whatever our experience has been. And just knowing that it's really our heart that's the gateway. It's the gateway to the opening, to the expansion, and to the letting go of and letting love in. So just continuing to breathe into your heart as we invoke the circle here, invoke this space. So we call forward the presence of love, the divine protection that comes through the heart of God, the heart of the Spirit. And we recognize that we come together here and we ask for the blessing. We ask for the blessing that clears us, that allows us to let go of that which may weigh us down or feel limiting. And we also ask that we be filled with new possibility, with new insights, with deeper compassion, and ability to connect with ourselves and others. And so we ask that a special blessing be placed upon each being in the circle here, that they receive a gift tonight and from our work together, this courageous work of exploration, of naming and owning what your experience has been up until now, and also giving yourself permission to lean into a new possibility, a new experience. And so we call ourselves out of ordinary time, the ordinary busyness of life, and we shift our awareness into the extraordinary, knowing that there is a quantum field of energy that is holding us all together here, where miracles are made manifest. And we know that miracles are merely a shift in perception. So we dedicate ourselves here to the miraculous, all in service to the highest good. And so it is. And you can open your eyelids if you feel to do so. So I want to just invite you just to take a minute to look around our circle. Like we're in session 2. You can put it on gallery mode if that's easier for you. I'm just looking around. So let's just see who's here with us. We're in session 2 of a 3-part series. And people are still arriving. We knew a few people had some emergencies come up. But just taking a moment to presence yourself in the circle that we're creating together. I know it looks like my eyes are looking over at the side, but that's where I have the faces. So here, I'm going to switch my screen here for that. And the reason I invite this is just there's something powerful around letting ourselves be seen, knowing that others are looking at us in gallery view right now, but also seeing others, seeing the beautiful soul that is behind the eyes that's looking back at us through gallery view. And I also want to welcome a couple of new women into our circle that they're still arriving. We have Isabel, who I believe is in Switzerland. So Isabel, welcome if you're here yet or if you're arriving. It's really wonderful to have you in our circle. Isabel's a graduate of another one of my programs, so she really brings a beautiful energy. She's an incredible artist. And Mojgan, we welcome you. She missed the call last time. Mojgan is she's a dear woman that I know here in Los Angeles, so we want to welcome you into our circle. And with that, let's jump in. So let's just do a little bit of recap. So last session, in the last workshop, we really took some time just following your curious heart. We took some time listening to the clues that tell you what matters most for you. That really goes into clarifying your vision of love, this vision in your heart that is so meaningful and dear to you. And then we moved on to exploring your perception of love, which is your belief system around love, which sometimes has stories about ourselves or other people that may be causing some pain or limitation. And then we went on to explore what your healing opportunity is, just looking at like, how, if this life is here for me, how might the disconnect between my vision of love and my perception of love really be here for me? So we took some time clarifying that. And so what we're finding is that by clarifying what it is that we're seeking in relationship, and then identifying whatever it is that clouds our vision based on our perception of love, the next step that we'll be turning towards tonight is really learning how to live from the place, how to really make ourselves more available for this vision of love that we have. And tonight, what we'll be focusing on how to do this, how to really start lining ourselves up so that our awareness is lined up and being the person who is available for this vision of love, is that we're going to be uncovering a little bit more of what's been in the way, of what's been previously blocking you from having the experience that you most long for, and which is found in your chief complaint, which is the breakdown that happens in relationship. And we'll be unpacking that with much depth today. So today is rich. We're going to roll up our sleeves and jump in. And I just want to note that the invitation from your homework, from your love work last week, was just to really notice what you were observing, just noticing throughout your life, just if there was any new awarenesses came up. Again, I just invite you to keep journaling or writing down any new insights or ahas that you might be having as we're doing this work, because it could really, there's something about paying attention to when we are having a new insight, that it communicates something to our being, that we're here, that we're present, that we are paying attention. And then I find that it starts unraveling a whole lot more awareness, given whatever the subject matter is. So keep that journaling up, keep just observing what's been present for you. And so with that, what I want to talk about tonight, and I'm going to go over a little bit of just a little overview, and then we'll dive into the exercises. But in my work over these past 24 years, I believe it is, I continue hearing from people that there's this feeling that more is available in our intimate relationships. I know that's what had me get out of my previous relationships. Nicholas and I have been together for 8 years now, but my other 2 prior relationships that were significant ones for me, I just felt like there had to be more. Like there had to be more. I wanted to have more time spent really enjoying the sweetness with my partner instead of arguing so much. I know that a lot of us, like, we want more satisfying dates that really lead to long-term relationships. And for most of us, we really just want to experience more feelings of harmony and connection that really comes from being at peace with ourselves. Because what we know, and what I found to be true, that relationship is the crucible. It is like what touches the most beautiful parts of ourselves, but also has the power to bring us to our knees. And given that there's this place in our being, in our heart, where we long for this intimacy, we long for the sweetness, we long for the sense of belonging that really comes, at being looked at through the eyes of love. Like, that is a human, it is such a biologically woven longing that we have to give and receive love. And we die, we perish, we suffer if we don't have this. So there's this longing that we have for this feeling of safety that really comes from knowing just how cherished we are, how adored we are, just for being who we are, even warts and all, even with our unresolved issues, even with our cellulite, even with our secret hurts, whatever it is. At the end of the day, most of us really, really, really long for this experience of being seen more fully, of having more ease in their relationships, having more harmonious conversations, especially about things that matter, that may be difficult, having more ease in communicating and really naming and expressing what is true for ourselves. So, what comes with that, the contrast that comes with that, is that I also hear about how many of us feel stuck. Where we feel stuck in our patterning, where we feel stuck in the rut, where we're on the hamster wheel of doing the same thing over and over again, yet we're wanting different results, we're hoping, we're waiting, we're stuck, we're dating the same people, different name, same dynamic. Maybe we're in a marriage that's been lackluster for a really long time. And there's just this feeling of feeling stuck. And I know for me, I spent a lot of my life just feeling stuck with the same hurt feelings. Like, I just could not stop recycling these hurt feelings inside, and the emotional breakdowns that I would go through, they were very thematic. And so I just want to take a moment here for each one of us just to tune in to where you feel stuck. Just noticing, is where you feel stuck with hurt feelings that just don't seem to be resolved? Is where you feel stuck with complaints, like the same old complaints about your partner, or the same old recycling arguments where you just keep going around the same thing over and over again? And just noticing if you feel stuck in terms of your dating life, if you're stuck going on mediocre dates, or good dates that ghost, or if you're just stuck and not happy about your dating experience, or that nobody's coming along. Maybe you feel stuck because you're single and it just doesn't seem like there's any eligible partners out there. So just starting to notice, and we're going to be doing an exercise that dives deeper into this in a little bit, but we want to just start, shifting our awareness from where we've been out in the world today, handling the needs of others at work, with kids, whatever we've been doing, and just start dropping in. So the way that we start dropping in is just start noticing, oh, what's real for me? Like, if we can find ourselves on the map, then it gives us a sense of like landing. So it's like we're here looking at our relationship map. So just tuning into where you feel stuck. Maybe you feel stuck in the confusion, or like feeling like, why does this feel so hard? Or I don't understand why this is difficult, or why have I not gotten this yet? Or maybe there's a sense of stuckness and feeling or fearing that you might need to settle, that you'll never really have what you long for. Or maybe you just feel stuck in that you're going to be single forever. Maybe you've been single for a long time. Maybe you had a divorce. Maybe you've never actually had a primary relationship that really was a heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul union. And maybe there's this feeling like you're stuck just being single, and maybe that you've missed your prime. So just tuning in to where you feel stuck. Because this is what we're going to be unpacking, and we're going to be mining this. I know for me that like I spent years of my life just feeling so stuck. I was so convinced that I was uncared for. I know for me, like that was my narrative that I would always fall back on, is that I didn't matter, I was invisible, that I was uncared for, and that no one would possibly stay, that no one would possibly stay. And so for me, where I often feel stuck was I was always with men that would leave. And so for me, there was this deep longing for connection and longevity, but then I was stuck in this pattern of only calling in men that did leave. So what I found is that the bottom line is that many of us, that we're stuck in the familiar pain of disconnection, the familiar pain of disconnection, or we're stuck in the unfulfilled yearning for connection. So I'm going to say that again, because I find that this is what underscores a lot of what's underneath a lot of where we feel stuck. We're stuck in the familiar pain of disconnection. It's like, oh, there's that frustration, that disappointment. See, I knew that this person wouldn't stay with me, or I knew that this would fall apart. We're stuck in the familiar pain of disconnection, or we're stuck in the unfulfilled longing for connection. The unfulfilled longing for connection. It's like this vision of love that has yet to manifest, and there's this unfulfilled longing of connection. And so if we just slow that down a little bit, what does this mean? So I want to kind of like break apart what does this mean and why this matters to you, and how this is setting you up for the exercises that we're going to be doing today. Well, it matters because for many of us, we long to break through these barriers that have kept us feeling separate from others. Or there are these barriers that we continue to experience, that we come up against, that have us be consistently unfulfilled in romance. So we're here in a workshop where it's moving from breakdown to breakthrough. And so for many of us, like there's this barrier where we feel stuck. So it feels like this barrier that keeps us separate from what we really want, from our vision of love. And then we usually want to break through it. It's like we want to just get rid of the barrier, get on with it, and get on to our vision of love. And what I found, these barriers that show up, they're called your chief complaint. I call them the chief complaint. Your chief complaint is the repetitive challenge that you face in relationships. It's the stuff that comes up whenever you get close to someone, and it's the stuff that really pulls you down. And we've all got a chief complaint. So today, what we're recognizing and what we're here to realize is that the barriers themselves, the chief complaint, the challenges themselves, are actually part of the breakthrough. And so the way that we view these barriers, the way that we view our breakdown, the way that we view our chief complaint, and the meaning that we give them is actually part of the process of transforming our relationship challenges. So today, what we're going to be exploring is that we have the power. We have the power to transform our relationship experience. And the power that we're going to be reclaiming today is by uncovering the stories that you tell yourself and what you make them mean about you, having to do with your relationship challenges. So our goal today is to see more clearly how much power you do have to create a new experience by using your relationship with your chief complaint as the doorway. So in today's workshop, Discover Your Love Story, we're going to be discovering the story you tell yourself that keeps you separate from the love in your heart, the vision of love that is this calling that is calling you forward. And so we all have stories that tells us what is possible, what's not possible. And so the goal of this session is to identify the story that keeps us separate from experiencing the love we want, that keeps us separate from living into our vision of love. And then we're going to be identifying the pattern that keeps the story alive. And so in order to identify what an actual breakthrough would look like, we first have to look at this breakdown. We have to look at the pattern in your chief complaint that is the outpicturing of your perception of love, your belief system around love. And so then we're also going to be identifying the area where you are right for a breakthrough. And so we're going to be diving in, we're going to be jumping in pretty quick here. But first, I want to be really, really clear that before some of the stuff that might come up, it may be hard. For some people, you may be really seasoned with doing personal development work. It may be really easy for you to articulate stuff that's been tender or vulnerable. And for other people, it brings stuff up. And so the first and foremost, it's like the power tool that we have, this power tool that's found in our heart, is that we want to make it safe to look. We want to make it safe to look. We want to all come into agreement to the best of our ability that we're not going to judge what we see, that we're not going to judge ourselves. We're not going to judge the stories that we find that we tell ourselves about love. We're not going to judge our chief complaint. We just really want to make sure that we're doing this work in these next exercises, that we're looking at ourselves and our stories through the lens of empowered responsibility, instead of the eyes of self-judgment or helplessness, because the more that we can enter into this territory, knowing that sometimes it does stir up feelings, I'm not saying that it's going to, but sometimes it does, we want to make sure that we're really connected to the bigger part of ourselves that's resourced and that is looking through the eyes of freedom and looking through the lens of empowered responsibility. So the three things that go into, how is it that we look through the lens of empowered responsibility? The three things that go into that, as I was saying, number one, we make it safe to look. We're willing to be kind to ourselves as we are looking at what our part is or has been in our relationship breakdowns. Often self-judgment is what acts like a glue that locks these patterns in. So here today, we consciously commit to being kind to ourselves. The second part that goes into really ensuring that we're looking at ourselves through the lens of empowered responsibility is that we seek to take ownership for what our part is or what our part has been, because we realize that's where we get our power back, by recognizing that we're not a victim to our life or to our life's lessons. And then the third part of how we look through the lens of empowered responsibility is that we look for the truth. We look for the truth and we accept the truth, even if the truth means that there's actually nothing wrong with us. For so many of us, we have these core beliefs that think that we're somehow flawed or that there's something wrong, especially when we're in the pattern, when we're stuck in our relationship crises, or we're stuck in the pain of not having what we want in relationship. And many of us have a hard time really accepting that we are perfect, whole, and complete as a child of the universe. So this is how we want to really be giving ourselves permission to move into these exercises from a place of kindness, from a place of compassion, and really make it safe to look. So let's move into the first section for today. So what we're going to be doing now is naming your chief complaint. So we're going to be moving into a journal exercise in just a couple of minutes. So just make sure that you have your pen, whatever you have, your writing implement nearby. You can have your PDF nearby because we're going to be walking through some of these questions. So let's get ready just to start diving into naming your chief complaint. So as we've been looking at, we've been beginning to see the lens that we've been viewing relationship through, which is colored by your past experiences, which is your perception of love, and how it's been clouded by these limiting beliefs and old feelings. All of these point to your healing opportunity. So we're going to take it a little bit deeper now. So the goal of this exercise that we're doing here is really just to make what is unconscious more conscious by shining the light on what's been going on inside, by shining the light on how much power we do have to move from breakdown to breakthrough, so we may really live into our vision of love here. So what we're going to be looking at is the contrast between, if we look at our vision of love, this calling in our heart, we're going to be looking for where the gap is, where the disconnect is that keeps us separate from our visions here, our perception of love's here. There's this gap in the middle that keeps us in breakdown, that has us not living into and actualizing our vision of love. So we're going to be looking at how we can repair this gap. And so let's say that your healing opportunity that you uncovered is to release old anger that you've been carrying towards men. So we're going to be looking, as we go through this exercise, we're going to be seeing how, if you've been looking through a perception of love, if you've been looking through a lens, a belief system that says men can't be trusted, how this may be contributing to the frustrating, repetitive dynamics that come up for you in relationship. And so you'll also be seeing that these repetitive dynamics, that they're really further revealed by the inner narratives They're the often invisible scripts that we tell ourselves. We all have a script. We all have a story that we tell ourselves that it's what keeps us, it's energizing the hamster wheel that we're on, which keeps us tethered to our chief complaint. And so in this next exercise, we're going to begin identifying our chief complaint and then uncover the story you tell yourself about why you think that you don't have your vision of love. So we recognize that your story here, it's important. Your story matters because it really gives a further context as to how you've been viewing your experience, which then tells us where the opening is to shift from the power being out there in circumstances or in the people around us to being in here inside of us. So this is how we're going to be moving out of breakthrough. We're going to be finding and locating where we have choice. Because when we find where we have choice, we find our power. And it moves us out of feeling victimized. It moves us out of feeling helpless. Like when we feel that we have choice, it actually starts mobilizing a circuitry in the brain that's creative and resourceful and helps us see new possibilities. So we're going to be uncovering your core relationship challenge in this next exercise right here, which is the breakdown. It's the dynamic that I call your chief complaint. So what is a chief complaint? So a chief complaint is the repetitive dynamic, and you're going to be hearing a lot about this today. And by the time you complete the session, by the time we walk away from here, you're going to have a crystal idea of what this means for you. So your chief complaint is the repetitive dynamic. It's the challenge that you face in relationships. And so a dynamic, it's the dynamic that comes up. It's the hamster wheel that you're stuck on. It's this repetitive thing that keeps you looping around. And what I want to underscore that a dynamic is defined as the force or change that causes progress. So the positive assumption that we're standing on today, that we're holding here, is that this dynamic, your chief complaint, is actually forcing you to let go of old hurts or old pain so you may progress developmentally in your relationships, whether that be emotionally, mentally, behaviorally, spiritually, or otherwise. And so a chief complaint, it's made up of two parts. It's made up of a story and it's made up of a pattern. So we're going to be looking for your chief complaint. We're going to start naming it. So, I just want to say that this stuff can be tricky, especially if we've been steeped in personal development work for a long time. Sometimes our ego wants to shield us from actually seeing or naming what our actual experience is, because we have this idea of either what we think it should be, or we think we should know better, or we think that we shouldn't be struggling in this area or still in blame. So we really want to be giving ourselves permission to look for where things still feel really murky or messy or unclear. Look for where you feel stuck. I'm going to walk you through a specific exercise. But the goal of this, and a hint that I'll give you, is that you do want to look for the hurt. You want to look for the discontent. You want to look for the blame. This is not about looking at it through the eyes of what you think the right answer is. It's really giving yourself permission, again, to start looking at what's going on in here. So think of it this way. Think of, if someone were to come up to you in a market, and if they were asking you, how's it going? How's it going with your sweetie? Or how's it going in your dating life? What do you say? What do you complain about most? How do you feel when you're asked that question? Or if you're imagining that you're gossiping with your closest friend, what do you say? What's the relationship dynamic that triggers you the most? So maybe your chief complaint shows up through a dynamic of feelings of insecurity that are triggered by always calling in unavailable men or women. Maybe your chief complaint shows up through a dynamic of chronic ambivalence because you're not happy with your partner, or you keep dreaming of cheating or leaving. There's just this chronic ambivalence. Maybe the dynamic of your chief complaint shows up as feeling unfulfilled because you want more, yet you keep drawing in people that aren't capable of meeting you where you want to be met. Or maybe you're just perpetually tired of the dating scene. You're single, you've been single for a long time, you've done a lot of work on yourself, and maybe you even secretly feel a little bit of righteousness inside, convinced that there's really no one possibly that could meet you where you're at, because you have devoted so much of your life to doing your work, your deep inner soul work. And then you obviously keep attracting people that aren't a good fit, or you're just not attracting anyone at all. So again, so we want to start looking at what it is, what is this dynamic? What's the thing that you complain about the most? So you can get out your handout now. I'm going to walk you through it, and then I'm going to give you time for a journal exercise, but I want to walk this through together, and I'm going to open it for any questions before we start, just to make sure that we're all good with it. So as we move into the exercise of naming your chief complaint, you want to be looking at your relationship history. You want to be looking at your current experience, looking at what do you complain about the most. You want to be thinking of what the actual scenarios are that upset you. And again, give yourself the space to speak into the dynamic that you keep experiencing that has the most charge. So you're going to be asking yourself, what do you complain about the most? For example, maybe you complain how you're still single and you deeply want partnership. And so you're going to want to answer, underneath that, fill in, what do you complain about the most? Then you're going to move on to, what do you struggle with in this dynamic? Maybe it's that you struggle with all the online dating rules. You just want to be you, but it seems like you have to be inauthentic to get a date. And then you're going to ask yourself, who do you become in relationship that challenges you? Maybe you become very insecure and self-conscious. Again, just taking time to fill that in. We'll be doing this exercise in a minute. Looking at asking yourself, what is the repetitive dynamic that you feel most challenged by? Maybe it's that you seem to have a lot of good first dates, but few of them, if none of them, ever come back around. So you're going to be then summarizing what you just uncovered above into naming your chief complaint. So for example, my chief complaint is that I'm still single and I wish I weren't. I hate online dating because it seems so inauthentic and risky, and it brings out my insecurities when men or women disappear. I just don't know who to trust. And deep down, I wonder if there's something wrong with me or if I'm just meant to be single forever. So we're going to be moving into the journal practice here. So I want to give you some space. I'm going to give you a good amount of space to do this. But first, are there any questions about this? Is everyone clear? I want you to raise your hand. Are there any questions before we set you up for a silent journaling practice here? Let's just scan through and see. I'm seeing heads nodding, so everyone, that seems clear. Okay, great. We like that. That's good. Okay, so we're going to start. I'm going to start with 5 minutes, but we can extend it up more if we need to. So everyone let's close your eyes for a minute. And we're just going to take a moment to center ourselves and just give ourselves permission to lovingly reveal what our chief complaint is by naming what the repetitive relationship dynamic, what the breakdown's been, what you complain about the most. So giving yourself the space to connect deeply with your heart and with your wisdom. And whenever you're ready, please begin, and I'll signal you when we're at 5 minutes. Okay, so that's time, but let's see a show of hands if anyone needs a couple more minutes. Do we have anyone that needs a few more minutes? I see one. Okay, so let's just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, great. So let's give it 2 more minutes and I'll check back in. Okay, so just wrapping that up, and let's take a share from a courageous soul. Anyone want to share what you've uncovered so far? There's a few parts to what we're going to be walking through in terms of identifying your chief complaint, but this is just really the naming your chief complaint. So, and it's a very, Liz, let's hear from Liz, our intrepid, courageous one. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
What you got?
Okay, so starting with the first, my chief complaint is sort of a belief system that I'm aware that I have in myself, that I do not deserve the partner I want, or I'm not supposed to have the partner I want.
Mm.
So that just is about me and my own belief system, that I understand why I have it, but I haven't really been able to reverse it or to keep the perspective shifted long enough to really make a continual shift in it. You know, I'd be lying if, I have moments of not feeling that way, but I would, it wouldn't be truthful to say that I'm really 100% beyond that. And then the other thing is, I guess, well, I said under that umbrella would be that I tend to have a relationship with people who aren't really able to see me. And it's more about their agenda.
Yeah.
And how I can help with their agenda.
Yeah, you're getting some jazz hands.
So a perfect story, I don't know if other women can relate to this, but at my wedding video when I got married, the videographer said to my husband, "What is your favorite thing about Elizabeth?" And my husband said, "My favorite thing about her," he's like, "What's your favorite quality?" He said, "My favorite quality about her is how much she loves me."
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That sums it up.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I just got out of a relationship. I come to terms with the fact that I was just with a con man. And I had no clue. So it was really disturbing. So talk about not being seen. Oh, sorry, my dogs are grabbing.
So can you name, so the thing that you were saying, the outer experience, the dynamic that you call in, the actual scenario that you call in, what is that?
Oh, it's a not deserving.
Not the belief, but the dynamic. It was the second part that you shared?
About not being seen?
Yes, you call in men who don't see you.
Yeah, and not only that, not only they not see me, but that I'm kind of a vehicle for their own agenda.
Got it. Got it. So make sure you write that down, because I think that'll support the next parts of the exercise if you didn't capture that already. Because what we're looking for is there's the inner narratives, which we're going to be getting to in a little bit, like the jumbled up parts of our perception of love, which are these beliefs that we have. And what we want to be looking for right now is what the actual scenarios are. Like, what are the actual dynamics that we sort of, that life keeps serving us up? It's like, oh, I keep going out with the same person, or, oh, we keep arguing about who's going to walk the dog, or, oh, like whatever the thing is that plays out in the world. So just make sure that all of your CHAPE complaints have that in it, where it has some element of what the actual thing is that's also playing out in the world. Like you said, where you call in men that don't see you. So great. Thank you so much, Liz. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to share? I see Tanisha. Hi, Tanisha. What you got for naming your chief complaint?
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, so I am single. I don't want to be single. And I would say that I always feel like I'm not good enough. So in so many aspects, like I just can't see a place where I can be loved, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what keeps happening is like either the people that are attracted to me, or guys that are attracted to me, I'm totally not attracted to them at all. But I'll date people that I'm not attracted to, just to be like, oh, okay, well, this is safe. You know what I mean? I can't get my feelings hurt like this, but be totally. And then when I do find someone, it's very rare to find someone that I'm attracted to. I put them up on this pedestal and I like want so much from them. Like I want the things that I get from the men that I'm not interested in. I want that same sort of like adoration and like attention and all that other stuff from them, but I don't get that. And so I'm like, and then, so either I'll chase them, but recently I just stopped. Like, well, I'm not chasing anybody. I don't have to do that. So I don't know where I am.
Yeah. Well, I hear that you don't know where you are, and you did a beautiful job just vulnerably articulating how it shows up for you. So let's stay with it. We're going to go on. We've got, there's several steps to this. So I have a feeling we're going to get you to a good place.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think you did a really good job just naming what the dynamic is. So right on. So let's move on to part 2, and then we'll take some more shares after that. So remembering that your chief complaint, it's made up of 2 things. So your chief complaint, it's the breakdown, it's the repetitive dynamic that you always come up against. And it's made up of 2 things. It's made up of a story. It's the story we tell ourselves, which is part of that inner narrative, and then a pattern. It's the pattern in terms of how it plays out in the world. And so now that in that last exercise that you've named your chief complaint, we're going to be looking for the narrative in it by taking cues from your perception of love. So I'll break this down for you, and then we'll walk through it together. So you have this vision of love, this calling in your heart that says something like, I see myself in a relationship that's harmonious, that's loving, that's filled with warmth and connection. And then we have this perception of love, our belief system that says men are untrustworthy, women are unstable, relationships are too much work. And so then our chief complaint may sound something like, my chief complaint is that I'm still single. I wish I weren't. I hate online dating because it seems so inauthentic and risky. And it brings out my insecurities when the men just disappear. I just don't know who to trust. And deep down, I wonder if there's something wrong with me or if I'm just meant to be single forever. So underneath that, there's a story. There's a narrative. It's something that you unconsciously tell yourself that keeps you separate from your vision of love. And so your story, it's often conditioned by the old beliefs that come from your intimacy model. And I know I touched upon this a little bit last week. It's our intimacy model, which is really, it's all the messages that we received. It's the model that taught us what we could expect when it comes to love, connection, intimacy, having our needs met, everything that was modeled to us when we were young and forming, what we saw around when we were young and developing. It's what the messages were that we received based on what we saw. And this is what influences our perception of love. And so our story, it's based largely on our lived experience, on what our history has been. It's based on events from the past that occurred, maybe when we were young and powerless, that are still coloring our perception and our experiences now. And so we want to be thinking about what we regularly, with the thing that we regularly complain about, we want to tease out the storyline. And it's where we use words like I always or I never. So I'll always be alone, for example. I'll always attract emotionally unavailable men or women. I always want to bail. I'll always feel over responsible for another's feelings. I'll always feel stuck in my marriage. I'll always lose myself in love. Men or women always withdraw or leave me. I always bypass my own red flags and get attached, even when I know it's not good for me. I always trust too quickly and get burned. So these are some examples. Or maybe yours goes along the lines of I never. I'll never find a partner that's a true match. I'll never be fulfilled by my current partner. I'll never meet anyone where I live. I'll never be able to let my guard down. I'll never feel at ease. I'll never get what I want. So we're going to be walking into this next part of identifying the story that you tell that keeps you separate, the story that's in your chief complaint. So again, you're going to basically just take a few minutes. We're going to give you 5 minutes here to summarize the bottom line narrative that weaves its way through your challenging relationship experiences. What is your inner narrative that speaks to I always or I never? And we want to come up with one salient term. So you can do a list of them if that helps you with a brain dump, but we want to find the one that has the juice, where it's I always boom or I never boom. So let's see if you can narrow it down to the one that you really feel in the pit of your stomach, or you feel the pain out of your heart. So again, let's just take a moment, if you like, and close our eyelids. And we just take this moment once again to connect with the wisdom in our heart, knowing that we are here to make it safe to look, knowing that we might be looking at things that have painful stories attached to them, painful beliefs attached to them. And just once again, centering ourselves in our heart, in our deepest, wisest self. And so whenever you're ready, please begin. You've got 5 minutes to explore what's the inner narrative that speaks to I always or I never, that underscores your chief complaint. Okay, so just bringing that to a close here. And then we're actually going to just jump right into part 2 of this exercise. That was part 1 of identifying the story in your chief complaint by uncovering the narrative of I always, I never. So let's just jump into part 2 here, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms for partner shares. Okay, so just if you can't do a breakout room, chat Abby on that so she knows. But for the next part, we'll do another 5-minute journal, and then we'll go into breakout room. Okay. And so part 2 of identifying the story in your chief complaint is where we want to put it all together. So we want to take your notes from your perception of love and combine it with the narrative in your chief complaint. So in other words, this is the story that's been running behind the scenes that you tell yourself about what is or is not possible in love and intimacy. So for example, so I spaced it out so you're going to be filling in the gaps. So in a world where insert perception of love, so in a world where men are untrustworthy, women are unstable, and relationships are work, that's the perception of love. And then you'll insert your chief complaint, the dynamic, where that will be, and I'm still single and I hate the dating scene, yet I deeply want partnership. Then you're going to drop in the I'll always or the I never, the narrative of your chief complaint. Therefore, I'll always be alone. So, and I have it spelled out there for you. It's a formula, so you can drop it together. So you take 5 minutes to put that together, and then we'll go out into breakout rooms. So just please begin right now, starting 5 minutes on the clock. Okay, so just bringing that to a close, and we're going to be moving into breakout rooms where you can share with each other what the completed, what you identified as the story in your chief complaint, that last exercise, which is the summary of it. And so how this will work is once you go into a breakout room, you each will have 2 minutes. So just 2 minutes, really it's just to share yourselves, just to let yourself be seen and heard, and just to create connection here with ourselves. So you'll have 2 minutes and you can share anything else that comes up during that space. And as the listener, really just remember, just listen. This is no advice. You can give a lot of praising. You can encourage if it feels appropriate, like how beautiful this person is in front of you. This is not a place for advice. This is not trying to fix it or make anything different. So Abby will start letting people into breakout rooms. And once we're in rooms, we will cue the 2 minutes and the person with the longest hair will begin. So whoever has the longest hair will begin. And so let's go into our breakout rooms. Everyone, welcome back. So who would like to share from that process? Who would like to share what you've uncovered as to what the storyline is for your chief complaint? Dart, is it, well, what is it? I see D Hart, but I'm feeling that's not your name.
Sorry, it's Danielle Hart. I need to change that.
Okay, I'm like, I feel like it's something else. Okay, hi Danielle.
Hello. Okay, so I have, in a world where relationships are anxiety provoking and I feel trapped and my needs are secondary, I always do whatever I need to do to feel secure, and that often does not align with my true self.
Yeah. And is there a way that you can also add a further example of how that shows up in the world? Like give a specific example of how does that show up if you don't align with your true self?
That shows up in, I was just explaining, drama in the relationship, because at some point then I start feeling trapped and then resentful, and then I'll play a role of caregiver. Not that I'm not, but not to the extent I play when I really like someone. Is like their first everything. And then eventually, if I don't feel it back, I start, feeling resentful. Then I start shifting in, not even to my true self, but this just resentful person. And then it creates drama in the relationship because they're like, wait, I thought I knew you, but now you're acting different. And then,
And thank you for naming that. And why I ask, which is what you just so beautifully did, it's sometimes so easy for us, we can get, for a lot of us, especially if we've been doing this work, like we're really clear on, like we can name our insecurity or we can name the limiting belief or things like that. And where a win can be is naming what the outpicturing is in life, because then it starts taking the subjective experience of feeling like, oh, what's wrong with me? Or like the subjective experience of I don't matter, or, my needs don't count. Then we can pull it out of ourselves and it kind of turns into this objective thing that we can see clearly, where it's like, oh, that's the thing I keep doing. Like I keep going out with people that like trash my heart. And the way they trash my heart is that they don't call me back, or they're mean to me and then they want something from me, or like whatever it is. The more we can give the physical world example, it just starts help us seeing, because this stuff can be really sneaky. You did a really good job. This is just sort of a teaching point for everyone. Like it can be really sneaky because sometimes we're just in this experience of like, it just doesn't feel right. Like I'm not showing up for myself here. But the more we can name where it's like, oh, I don't show up for like it doesn't feel right, or the dynamic is when I sleep with someone too soon, or when I get emotionally attached before I've even found out if this person's single or available. Or it shows up in how I keep, nitpicking my husband. Anytime he gets home from work, the first thing through the door, I'm on his back. So part of this, and I encourage all of you in the naming of your chief complaint, make sure there's an actual scenario, like an actual physical scenario that is what the outpicturing is of the chief complaint. And also, thanks for being the courageous one of sharing your chief complaint here. Thanks so much, Danielle. All right, anyone else that would like to share it? Do we have any other takers raising hands, just kind of scanning through here. Kim. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm not sure I got the whole question written down, quite the statement.
That's all right.
But the basics is, in a world where my perception of men is that they're selfish and ego driven, I feel like that if I ask for what I need and want out of the relationship, that person will leave. And I feel like I'll always be single because I will always compromise myself to the point of not being me anymore to keep them around. And then I just get resentful, just like Danielle. It's like, and so I just always call in unavailable men that are just about themselves and can't even, I just was on a date with a guy I dated him a couple of times the last few weeks, and I realized he wasn't even looking at me most of the time we were together, like at dinner or whatever. I was like, same pattern.
That's a great awareness, and that's a great physical example of how it outpictures. Of
Yeah,
like,
that was just very obvious very early on, which for me, it was like after the first date, I was so excited. And then I got home and went, wow.
Yeah.
He never even looked at me for like the whole thing. And a couple of weeks later, after talking and texting and spending a little time together, he has no idea. He's visiting town. He has no idea who I am. Mm-hmm. And I went to dinner with his friends and he last night, and the other friends were like, oh, you're Kim Raymond? We've heard of you. And he looks at me like, oh, I thought your name was Reynolds.
Wow. Wow. So those are amazing examples that sort of are the outer world expression of this perception of love. Mm-hmm. You know, these amazing examples of how like he's unavailable in terms of not even available for contact and being present with you in terms of eye contact or even knowing your name. Thank you for naming that. I know it's like sometimes not easy looking at this stuff. And the next part of the exercise, we're going to go into it even more, because really we want to start bringing out into the light of the day, like, why do I keep calling this into my field? You know, there's something in me, like I say I want this, but I'm experiencing this. And there is some beautiful intelligence of you in your soul, in Danielle's soul, and Tanisha's soul, and Kim, everyone that shared here, and Liz's soul. Like, it's like there's a wisdom of life that is trying to get our attention through these experiences. So thank you so much for naming that. And we're gonna go even deeper now. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to get into the next meaty part, which really is looking at even, it's like we want to be deconstructing the pattern, because when we can start seeing it more clearly, it really does start freeing up the energy to recognize that, oh, I'm a co-creator of my experience here. So the goal here, again, is not to look through the eyes of what's wrong with me, you know, I'm so lame for doing this, why don't I know better? We're looking through the lens of empowered responsibility, of really looking at like, okay, this is what's been my part, and we're going to look a little bit more at what your part has been, and then now what can I do about it? How do I start the repair process? So that's what we're going to be doing in this next section. So with that, we're going to be now, as I had said before, this final part today, we're going to be moving into looking at the pattern of your chief complaint, because your chief complaint has a story, which is what you all just named, and then it has a pattern. And so we're going to be rolling up our sleeves and just sort of jumping into the deep end of the pool here, and really looking at where each one of us may have, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to step into a greater sense of empowered responsibility and really look at the pattern that maybe has been unconscious, so we can start naming it and bringing it out into the light of day, which is often where we get our power back. So remembering that a dynamic is defined as the force or change that causes progress. Again, the assumption that we're going on here, the positive assumption that we're going on, is that this dynamic in your chief complaint, it's forcing you to let go of old hurts or misbeliefs that you've carried about yourself, or old pain, so that way you may really progress developmentally. Like a lot of us, we've regressed in certain levels developmentally, especially when it comes to relationships. So this is an opportunity to start looking at like, oh, maybe I'm a little stunted, or maybe there's room for me to progress emotionally, or maybe it's mentally, maybe it's behaviorally, maybe it's spiritually. So we're going to be really looking at this in the next part, and knowing that a chief complaint is made up of these two parts, which is a story and a pattern, we're starting to ask ourselves here, what is the pattern that holds up my chief complaint? Because the pattern holds the keys to the areas where we break down. And where we break down is usually where we feel powerless, where it's like, this thing is happening to me. And so this is the pivotal turning point that really helps us begin to move from relationship breakdown to breakthrough. So this next exercise that we're walking through, part one of it, is identifying the pattern in your chief complaint. So again, I'm going to walk you through this, and then you'll have time to journal about it. So you want to come up with a clear, specific example to work with to uncover the pattern. And I love the one that Kim just said, in like, I date men that are unavailable, that don't even make eye contact with me or know my name. Like, that's a great example of the pattern. So for example, my pattern is that I go out with people even when I intuitively sense it's not a good fit. There's always an emotional fallout because I still get hooked. Or maybe my pattern is that I look to my partner for emotional support even when I know it's not a good time for them, which then turns into an argument because they're distracted, and then I feel even worse than I did before. Or my pattern is that I jump into sex too soon because before I feel emotionally safe, and then I always get burned. Or maybe my pattern is that I avoid asking men or women out because I assume that I'll be turned down. So we're going to take a couple of minutes here. We'll take 3 to 4 minutes to do some journaling, just to start naming what the pattern is that makes up your chief complaint. So before we go into this section, I would just want to see, does everyone understand? Any questions about what you're doing here? You're looking for the pattern that you keep coming up against based on the examples. So let's see, just scanning through. Do we have any questions? It looks like we're all good to go. All right, so let's just
question, I think, right, Christina?
Do.
Hi there, Christina. What's up? What's your question?
So my question is, let me just share this. So I have a pattern when I'm in relationship to give up myself to accommodate what they need. So my needs fall by the wayside and their needs become front, forward, and center. But now my pattern is, why would I ever want to get in a relationship? So now my pattern is, I'm too busy for a relationship. I barely have time to do all the things I want to do. Why would I add drama, confusion, a guy in my life? So which pattern are you asking us to offer?
That's a good one. I would hybridize.
Leads into the next pattern.
Yeah.
My experience was that, and so now I'm too busy, because why bother?
Yeah, I think that is such a succinct, painfully beautiful example of how, like you said, how connected they are. So I would name both of them. I would come up with a statement that really, my pattern has been, in the name of how it was in your past. And now what it looks like is, I'm too busy, and why even bother?
Yes, because it's like, my lack of boundaries has led to both.
Yeah. I think that's great. And then when we walk through the more of the the deeper dive questions through it, of just really looking at the pattern, I have a feeling that will support you holding both of them: the lack of the boundaries and the now being too busy.
Yeah,
Does that help?
Being too busy protects me.
Yeah.
Because I don't have good boundaries.
I know, up until now.
Up until now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And that's another great example of, I wasn't looking because I just have you on the screen, but I imagine there were a lot of jazz hands that could relate with the giving ourselves away, the losing ourselves, lack of boundaries, and then the like, why even bother? Getting too busy to sort of distract from it or to protect yourself. So thank you for saying that. Okay. Any other questions for clarification before we move into this part, identifying the pattern? Okay, so if not, let's just again close our eyes and center ourselves in our heart. And the reason why I keep bringing our attention back to the heart is because it is the ultimate resource that we have inside us to start releasing and letting go of and unbinding us from past hurts. So just even in this moment, taking a breath into your heart, giving yourself permission to lovingly reveal what the pattern is that makes up your chief complaint. And whenever you're ready, we'll start with 5 minutes, and I will cue you when we're there. Please begin. Okay, and just wrapping that up. And so this next part of this exercise is that we're going to be then combining the story and the pattern in your chief complaint. So you're going to be taking the story that you identified in the previous exercise and then the pattern that you just uncovered and complete the sentence. So you're going to be just combining them together. So the story and the story and the pattern in my chief complaint is, and the example that I give is, so again, you're bringing the story that we did in the exercise earlier over to what you just uncovered now. So for example, in a world where men are untrustworthy, women are unstable, and relationships are work, that's the perception of love, and I'm still single, yet I hate the dating scene, and I deeply want partnership, that's the dynamic. I'll always be alone. That's the narrative. Therefore, my pattern is that I jump into sex too soon before I feel emotionally safe, and I always get burned. So you're going to be bringing these together. Don't worry if it's not perfectly crisp yet, but at least get to the essence of it. So it's going to be such a beautiful thing just for you to start seeing sort of the roller coaster that or the hamster wheel rather, that you've been on. So we're going to take a couple of minutes to do this, just to really synopsize the story and the pattern in your chief complaint. So I will cue you in a few moments. We'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes for this. Okay, so just bringing that to a close. Does anyone need a couple more minutes just on that part? Do a show of hands. Just scanning through, see any hands? No? All right.
I think Kim needed one more minute.
Okay, let's give you another minute, Kim. Well, Kim is just finishing up there. Does anyone want to share what they've uncovered so far? What the story and the pattern in your chief complaint is? I see everyone's still writing, so we'll just hold in that. So we're going to be segueing into part 2 of this exercise of identifying the pattern in your chief complaint, part 2. So we're going to keep with the writing exercise. So it's okay if you're still capturing it. So what we want to be exploring next is how you show up inside of the pattern. Because when we're in a pattern, when it's happening, there's ways that we show up inside of it. So we want to be looking at what are some of the ways that we may unconsciously be perpetuating the pattern based on how we think, how we feel, and how we're acting. And so what we're going to be doing in this next exercise is just really pretending that you're an investigative reporter. You're an investigator, you're reporting on an incident, and you're really just relaying the details of the scene as objectively as best as possible. Not only how you felt or what you perceived, but what is it that actually happens? So as you'll see in the PDF for your love work assignment, it walks you through a series of questions. So for example, so the first question is, when you're in the pattern, and I want to give you a good amount of time for this. So I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to give you some good time for it. So when you're in the pattern, what happens and what do you do? So for example, using the running example that we're going with, I jump into sex too soon before I feel emotionally safe, and I always get burned later. I end up distracted. I can't focus at work. I surf on social media mindlessly. I overeat. I can't seem to find myself. So this is an example of what happens. The happens is the jumping into sex too soon and getting burned. And then what you do is the can't focus, the surfing on social media, overeating. So we're looking for what happens and what do you do inside of the pattern. And then we go on to how do you think? So for example, I think because I've been single for so long and I'm hungry for touch, what's the point of slowing down since he or she will never stick around anyways? So again, you want to write down whatever your thinking is inside of the pattern. And then we move on to how do you feel, or what do you feel? So for example, I feel ashamed of myself and I fear my needs for emotional safety and stability are unrealistic. Then I fear that I might feel insecure, needy, mad, sad, glad, scared, anxious. So again, just naming how do you feel when you're inside of the pattern, and then looking at how do you behave inside of the pattern. When I go out with a new person that I meet online, I always have a drink or two to loosen me up. So again, this is looking at behavior. I play more cool than I really feel, and I don't let on that I actually want to be in a long-term relationship. I turn on my flirty persona because I know I can seduce them and win that way, even just for a night. I shield my heart and turn off parts of myself. So, and then we want to look at when I'm in the pattern, who do I blame? Who is at fault? Do I blame myself? Do I blame my psychology? Do I blame my parents? Do I blame my history? Do I blame society at large? Who do I blame? And when I'm in the pattern, what am I assuming? What am I assuming about my abilities? What am I assuming about others? And the way that I feel about myself when in the pattern is mad, sad, glad, hopeless, ashamed, whatever it might be for you. So again, I want to give you a good, let's start with 7 minutes here and we'll see where everyone's at. So any questions before we jump into really deconstructing who you become inside of the pattern? So let's just do a check through. Do we have any hands? I'm going to keep with the journaling exercises here. Okay, so it looks like we're all on board. Okay, great. So again, if you want, just let's close your eyes and just take a deep breath. And once again, center your awareness in your heart, just acknowledging yourself for how courageous you're being right now and even being willing to look at this stuff. And so whenever you're ready, just with kindness and patience in your heart, let's move forward into exploring who you show up and how you show up inside of the pattern. And timer is on for 7 minutes, and I'll check back in after 7 minutes and see if we need more time. Okay, and how many would like a couple more minutes? I see some hands. Okay, let's give it a couple more minutes. Okay, and coming back from that, and if you do need some more time to continue with it when we complete, just if you can, if you feel like the energy is still present and you want to, I totally encourage you to do so. I think it's just a real gift that you give to yourself. And just in service to time, let's move into the final portion of this for today, which will be continuing with the journaling process here. And so this final part, it's really just designed to support in the reprogramming of a new script, a new story, by connecting with what is actually true. And so again, remembering that our perception of love, it's a direct result of our conditioning. It's a direct result of all the conditioned messages that we received in our intimacy model. And so if our old story has us turn against ourselves or others, based on that's what we saw growing up, or that's what we witnessed around us, it's almost as if we've had this spell that's been cast on us, and we've been living in this trance of a lie. It's a spell that has obscured us from seeing clearly. And so it may be a convincing spell, it may be a convincing untruthful lie, basically, that we continue to tell ourselves, since it may feel really true at times. The story that says, I don't matter, or I'll always be alone, or I'll never be safe in a relationship, whatever it is for you. But the reality is if we're always coming out the loser in these narratives and these storylines, then we know deep down it's just not true. There is a wholly wise part of each one of us that knows what the truth is. Danielle was talking about her true self. Like, I really get that she has contact and access with her true self. And a lot of you women that I know in this group, I know that to be true of you. And even the ones that I'm getting to know, it's like every single one of us has our truth lives inside. What we want to be doing in this next part is, if you were to guess, what would you imagine the bigger lesson is for you in your chief complaint? Like, remembering how a dynamic is defined as this force or change that causes progress, knowing that the assumption that we're holding is that the painful dynamic in your chief complaint is actually forcing you, it's inviting you to let go of old hurts and old pain so you may progress developmentally. We want to be looking at where the opportunity is For you, maybe it's emotionally, maybe it's mentally, maybe it's behaviorally, maybe it's spiritually. We want to start looking through the eyes of contacting where truth lives inside of us, moving from feeling disempowered and like, oh, this thing is happening to me and it's always going to be happening to me, but really into like, if there were a bigger lesson here, if there were a lesson here, I wonder what it might be. And this is not about getting it right. There's no pressure here. We just want to lean into the creative imagination. Maybe you have a clear sense of it. Maybe you don't. And if you don't, that's fine. Just make it up. Just make it up, because we want to bypass fixed thinking in the mind. And sometimes fixed thinking in the mind, it thinks it needs to know what the right answer is. And if we don't know, we can just shut down. So even if you might not be clear yet on what the lesson is, that's okay. We're not going to stop there. We just want to give you a chance to explore. So again, if you were to guess, if you were to make it up, if you did know what the lesson was, in using the following areas, what do you sense your opportunities for growth are in each of these areas? Maybe there's an opportunity for growth emotionally. Maybe there's an opportunity for emotional development or further healing and integration between your current self and your younger self. Maybe the chief complaint, the message in your, or the lesson in your chief complaint, maybe there's an opportunity for growth mentally. Maybe it's an opportunity for clearing out some old beliefs and old thought forms that keep you bound to limitation or negative assumption, especially about yourself. Maybe there's an opportunity behaviorally to really start looking at ways that you can show up that reflect the truth of who you are. I think we talked a little bit about this in our last session, where many of us, we have a clear sense of who we are. Many of us do. That's not the problem. It's that we behave, we show up in ways that do not reflect who we know ourselves to be at the deepest level. So maybe there's an opportunity behaviorally just to kind of clean up our actions so we're representing ourselves accurately. Maybe there's an opportunity spiritually in this. If we were to listen, like, what is the holy message that your chief complaint has for you? So just reflecting on those, remembering that this last part of the process is that we're here to look for the truth and practice accepting the truth. So the wisdom in your heart knows what's true for you, and it has the power to break the spell that you've been in. And so by reconnecting with your heart, with your deepest self, and by being a mirror of truth for yourself, we begin speaking words of truth to ourselves, which actually disarms the spell. And by speaking words into the ethers, just even giving yourself permission to type them out here that represent our highest truth, it really helps us in casting a new spell that opens us for our vision of love. And really, the truth is that you've been doing the best that you can, every single one of us. The truth is you're not bad or you're not wrong. You're not broken, you're not flawed. There's nothing wrong with you. The truth is you are worthy of love. And the truth is no matter what's happened in your past, it doesn't have to define you. The truth is you don't have to be alone or scared or anxious anymore. The truth is a warm, safe, and loving relationship is possible. And it starts here and now. And so what this exercise is it's really giving you an opportunity just to speak from your heart. What my heart would like me to know is, and just letting yourself receive of that, thinking of what's the opportunities for growth, be it emotionally, mentally, behaviorally, spiritually, tuning into imagining what the bigger lesson is from your chief complaint, just giving yourself a chance here to check in and just to really receive where wisdom is inside of you by connecting in with what my heart would like me to know is, and just seeing what messages revealed for you for that. So we're going to move into another journaling practice around that, and then to wrap up for the night. So we will be going over a couple of minutes, and so we're going to do a 5-minute journaling, and then we're going to take some shares on it, and then we're going to wrap up. So just, you can know that. So moving into, again, just gently closing your eyelids as we enter into this journaling practice. Just connecting with the wisdom in your heart and just tuning into where's the area of opportunity or growth? What's the lesson that might be here for me in my chief complaint? What is it that my heart would like me to know? And just giving yourself a few minutes here. I'll check in a couple of minutes. So please begin listening and receiving the message in your heart. And let's just bring that to a close here. Anyone need another minute for that? Okay. So what I would like to do is, well, originally I was going to have us go into breakout rooms just to share what the holy message of your heart is. But given that that takes a few minutes sometimes to assemble and not, let's just open this up for some sharings. What are some of the messages that you've received just from your heart, or any part of this process that you would like to share as we move into completion for today? Just looking through. Liz, do you have anything that you would like to share as to what your heart would like you to know?
So what I wrote about my heart is that I am loved, that I'm always loved by Source, and that this belief system that I have set up is not truth.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that I'm not somebody that's necessarily been chosen not to have the things in life that I want to have in terms of the person that I desire. But that's not truth. And that also that I am capable of being seen in a relationship, that would really seen, that I want to be seen.
And did you have a sense as to what the area is that may be up for you in terms of a developmental opportunity, in terms of emotionally or mentally, behaviorally?
So emotionally, I feel like this is a really good time for the adult part of me to work with the child part of me that internalized all these messages from my dad, you know, and just kind of have a heart to heart, you know, and with some clarity around this is not really my innate belief system. I've adopted somebody else's or internalized the way that I was treated as a kid.
Yeah.
You know? And that's old stuff from childhood, and that the adult in me, you know, understands at a real basic fundamental truth level that these things are not true and not real. And then mentally, I think it's a time to acknowledge the thoughts that keep getting perpetuated in my head to keep the system going, you know, to keep the spiral going.
Yeah. And I really love that you named that, because that is how we take our power back, because the mind we have choice over. We can't control our feelings. Sometimes we can't even control our behaviors. You know, I remember this one event that I was at with Carolyn Mace, and she was talking about how our energy systems often, you know, they get plugged into compulsions or certain behaviors. And she was likening it to try putting a plate of, you know, warm, straight from the oven chocolate chip cookies in front of you and refuse to have one. Like, it's almost impossible. But she was using the analogy of that. But there's certain ways behaviorally where we can't really control ourselves, and we can't really control ourselves emotionally. But mentally, we have a huge amount of jurisdiction as to what we allow stay. Again, we can't control what comes into our mind, but we do have so much choice as to what we allow to stay in our mind and then what we energize. So that is such a ticket to freedom, what you just said there mentally.
And I also have to add that I also have an awareness that a lot of these thoughts, even though they're destructive thoughts, they're comforting to me because they're familiar.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, you know, it makes it even harder or more of a challenge, you know, because I have to kind of own that, you know, own that comfort. And then if it's comfort, you know, stepping into something that's more of an unknown way of a thought process, a more thought, you know, a different system of thoughts.
Yeah. Because when you think of it, what we're talking about here, and for all of us, is we're disrupting our equilibrium. it's like we are disrupting our homeostasis. It's like if our internal relationship set point, and this is what my longer term programs are designed for, really working with how to overcome resistance by recognizing that resistance is part of the territory. Like our biology, our nature has designed us to resist growth in so many ways. Like we can't not grow, but there's a way where we are hardwired to protect ourselves from growing, because growing may mean, like if my set point, my intimacy set point is what I call it, if my set point has been normalized around calling in unavailable men, like you were saying, like that's my homeostasis. I'm actually comfortable in the discontent. Like I'm comfortable in the feelings of like longing. Like there's a bizarre comfort that our psychology wraps around these familiar areas. As unhappy as we may be, it's known as familiar, it's safe. And so what you're talking to and what we're all doing, it's like we're looking at how to disrupt our homeostasis. And so we want to be aware that it's going to kick up resistance. It always does. Yet we have these internal resources. We have this fortitude, the love in our hearts, the clarity of our spirits to really pull us through. So it's so important that you name that, because damn straight, like it is comfortable because it's familiar for all of us. And the narrative, no matter if it's an abuse situation, if it's an addictive situation, if whatever it is, typically we find that like for me, like my background, I had years of sexual abuse at the hand of multiple men. And so for me, I didn't even know, I thought being wanted was paired with someone having sex with me, not even me having sex with them, but somebody like raping me or violating me. Like it happened so young and I was so fragile. And so I just thought sex was the exchange for receiving attention, and for therefore in attention that there was love in there. And then when I grew up older, then I put myself in situations that were really dangerous, or I was on way too many drugs, and then naturally my body would be objectified because I didn't even know how to have a boundary system, because my homeostasis was to equate sex, even if it's like abusive sex or, rape sex, but that it's still someone paying attention to me. So I really hear you, or I'm embellishing upon how deep some of these wired patterns can go and how oddly familiar but agonizing they can be. And there is so much incredible access that we have, like you were saying, the conversation between your little, like talking with your little self from your adult self. Like, oh my gosh, we have so much to draw from in terms of from our current grounded, connected, established selves by really bringing ourselves to these parts that are hurting. So thank you for just naming those points. They're really key points. Is there anything else that you'd like to share right now?
Well, behavior, I wrote down kind of to fake it till I make it a little bit.
Yep.
Because I think one of the things that I uncovered here is there's probably, these feelings that I have inside, they must be readable on some level.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's something to be aware of.
How does that translate behaviorally?
Faking it till I make it.
Yeah, and that the feelings inside, that they must be readable.
Oh, well, I don't know how they would be readable, honestly, because I try to do everything I can to not have them be readable.
I understand, yes.
I just know that energetically they must be.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not aware of how that works, what that looks like, maybe, I know just common sense from everything I know that has to be the case.
That might be an amazing just sort of exercise to run. And for anyone here, like next time you can see yourself in the pattern or the patterns coming up, almost to imagine, like if I were a fly on the wall watching myself in the pattern, like what would I be seeing? Like, does my voice tone change? Do I talk differently? Does my body posture change? Do I start like fidgeting with things? Like just start kind of calling into consciousness, like what's it look like? Like, what are the words that I say? Like, what's it like to be me when I'm in the pattern from a fly on the wall perspective? Like, that might be really interesting.
Interesting, a little scary.
Yeah, I hear you. All of this is such a strength of heart endeavors.
Yeah. So, Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Sorry.
for sharing. All right, let's just check around. Does anyone else want to share either what they're walking away with from this exercise or what's opened up today? And then I want to talk about self-care. Oh, Isabel. Hi, Isabel. Oh. Let's see. There we go. Oh. I think you're unmuted. Are you unmuted? No, not yet. Let's see. Abby, can you see if she's unmuted?
Yeah, I'm trying. Let's see.
Oh, there we are.
Working now? Yes.
Yeah.
It's so rich. Like it's so much, there's so many things, you know, that I'm receiving from that. I've already, I guess my heart's what I would like to share that, would like me to know that I don't have to take care of others, and I can take care of myself. I can also live a loving relationship, and my need can be met.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what came up. You know, yeah, and I really, I mean, now I'm becoming really aware. I think, I don't know if it's a pattern, but my belief is I can never be satisfied. So with that in mind, that triggers like the feelings of hopelessness or helplessness of stuff, and I get out of that, but I occasionally get into that, and more so in relationship than other area in my life. And so I was just looking at that. Well, what is the comfort in this?
What is the what in this?
The comfort in this, you know, what, because sometimes I'm actually I'm not there at all.
Not there in
that belief.
In that belief.
So,
but when we're looking at it through the lens of relationships, so there's the belief, and then there's the pattern.
Yes.
How does the pattern physically manifest?
It's avoidance.
And so you avoid your husband, he avoids you?
I kind of get busy, or I'm doing that a little less than before, or less, but I kind of get busy, or I maintain a distance.
Yes.
So that would be the behavior, you know.
And so the comfort, and I know comfort's a tricky word because, you know, our mind doesn't easily think of, oh, I'm uncomfortable, so it's not comfortable. So it's like, I almost wonder if another way of saying it would be is, what do you get out of that?
I am not intimate. Maybe I'm not intimate. Maybe there is a fear of intimacy, or there is a vulnerability, or there is some feelings of shame. So I do everything, but like I do the financing, I do the accounting, I do, you know, I take some good decision. My life is getting a lot better on many, but I do not address maybe the intimacy, and I have some form of avoidance with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's either I have to take a decision to stay with my partner or to leave my partner, because I feel like I'm running in circle and with that.
Yeah, like the dynamic is like, that's the hamster wheel.
Yeah, because my desire is really to live in an intimacy with someone. Yeah, and so I see that I'm maintaining something in doing that, and I need to move forward into, and I've made tremendous growth, but I see that I'm getting there into just choosing to stop avoiding, and choosing to stop getting busy, and to slow down, and to move forward into creating this, you know, either with the person I'm with right now, my husband, or someone else.
I'm almost wondering if there's a way to move closer towards the avoidance. So just like what Christina was saying, where she was aware that she gets really busy and it's a form of self-protection.
Yes.
I'm almost wondering if there's something in here, and maybe this is just what you could sort of bring into your prayer or meditation or journaling or art,
Yeah.
but or instead of looking at how can I not be in avoidance, maybe more how has avoidance been protecting me? How has avoidance been keeping me safe? Do you sense that there might be
I do. I do.
there?
It's like if I open myself up, well, then maybe I'm going to be hurt.
Yeah.
So that's like, I do open myself to some extent, but I don't open myself
Mm-hmm.
to the fullest where I,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I think I have made the conclusion through my life with the few relationship I had that opening myself up, it means getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's very important to me to leave a loving relationship and to be open and spontaneous and to, so that has been a longing for me.
Mm-hmm. I really hear that.
Yeah.
Hear that. And if you were to explore this relationship, because it sounds like part of the pattern, part of the dynamic in your chief complaint is part of the who I become, how do I behave, is that you avoid. And there may even be some reflection in there in terms of where you've perhaps been avoiding parts of yourself. Maybe it's more assertive parts of yourself, or less pleasing parts of yourself, less people-pleasing parts of yourself. Like, I just wonder, maybe there's something in there around what parts of me have I been avoiding?
Yeah, there's people-pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware when I get into that I'm not in balance.
Yeah.
And I've caught myself doing that, and I'm like, okay, so what is that? What is it inside of myself that I'm avoiding really to face? Because I go into that.
I so appreciate just the depth of perception that you have in terms of how you're looking at and mining the stuff. And thank you just for even jumping in on the call, midway through, and just reaching out and just sharing yourself here, not avoiding being seen right now. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
So wonderful to have you here.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Gabriela.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right. So unless there's any other burning questions or shares, I want to just talk a little bit about aftercare. Okay, so I don't see any other hands. So what I just would love, so just as we're wrapping up here, and where I want to speak about the importance of aftercare, because we've been looking in areas that may be uncomfortable, as I've shared. And so it's so important to be sweet with ourselves, because sometimes this can bring up feelings or frustration or just whatever. It just might be stirring things up. And so just noticing tonight, just pay attention to tonight, just noticing what's present for you. How are you feeling? What are you eating? What are you doing? What are you choosing to watch on media sources? Just really keeping an eye out for, is this the best way that I could be taking care of myself right now? And maybe there might be something sweet that you could do for yourself tonight or tomorrow, because sometimes this activates stuff in our dreams, and we might have powerful dreams tonight. So again, just paying attention to that. But maybe if you could take a salt bath, or go for, I know it's cold and it's evening, but maybe go for a little walk, or just something that's really sweet for your heart. It's a beautiful way of just acknowledging your willingness to show up here and maybe look in some territory that might not be so comfortable, and just to really give yourself some sweetness. So aftercare is so important whenever we start sort of looking around at what's in there. So my wish for you tonight is a peaceful night, and I would just like to wrap up our time together, just seal it with a prayer, and then I will see you in 2 weeks. So if it's safe for you to do so, just close your eyes. And so Father, Mother, God, dear Lord of all creation, divine intelligence of life, presence of love, we just call ourselves forward into your light, and we ask for the clearing. We ask that anything that has been activated through these chief complaint exercises, anything that's been stirred up in anyone's consciousness that can be lifted, that this be lifted. We ask that anything that can be cleared, and that we be filled, surrounded, and protected by the presence of love, and the wisdom of our high self, and that we just connect deeply with our internal resources of compassion, of caring, of kindness. And we place each of our visions of love into the light here, asking that we each be shown ways that we can live into these more and more powerfully, in more and more ways, for the highest good. All right, dear ones, I bid you farewell tonight, and I will see you in 2 weeks. And until then, God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.